Hello. When we left our story, Louis was stuck on the ivy and Max was bravely climbing towards him in order to help him get down. It hadn't gone completely to plan, but it looks like they will come down all right now. I'm right underneath you. Hold tight to the windowsill and then you've got to sit down on my shoulders. I don't want to. Tough. Get on with it. Lower yourself slowly. Now, let go with one hand. Grab onto some ivy. Now the other. Below, Abby and Esme anxiously rearranged cushions. Okay, now we're going down like a ladder, Max told Louis. Keep holding the ivy to balance. Your knees are flipping bony. You needn't grip on so tight. He lowered himself carefully, foothold by foothold. Halfway, called Abby a few minutes later. Well done, Louis. Well done, Louis, demanded Max. Wow, this ivy is loose. Get out the way in case I have to jump. Jump? Squeaked Louis, letting go of the ivy and grabbing 2 handfuls of hair instead. Ow! Yelled Max and skidded vertically downwards in a shower of leaves. Esme grabbed Louis just in time to stop him tumbling. Max leaped the last stretch. Abby exclaimed, Brilliant, brilliant! And Louis said, Thank you, Max, thank you, and hugged him. It's okay, said Max, unused to being treated like a superhero, and stomped into the kitchen to finish his breakfast. As soon as Louis was back in the house, he bolted upstairs with Abby behind. This meant that Max was left alone with Esme, and for once she was smiling and looking at him. To cover his sudden awareness of this frightening and yet wonderful situation, he pulled her art book his way and began studying the pages. Some were collages, notes in French, tiny colour blocks, photographs, and maps copied out of books. Others were huge double pages, entirely filled with sketches of animals. Max paused at a great herd of bison racing across 2 full pages. As he stared at them, trying to fathom their distant, unfamiliar power, he was aware of Esme just behind him, not sneezing now or saying oof, just standing quietly as he looked at her work. Presently, she said, You did so good, Max, helping Louis, and leaned over and picked a stray ivy leaf out of his hair. Très cool, she added, with a laugh in her voice as she tucked it behind her ear. Très cool. And she pressed the back of his neck very gently, with 2 warm fingers. Very lightly and only for a moment, but enough that Max knew then, once and forever, that there was such a thing as magic. For down into the dizzying deepness of time slid Max, leaving everything behind except the echo of Esme's fingers, like 2 warm prints upon his skin, and although he could not look up, could only stare into the book and feel the strange shaking of his heart, he gradually became aware that a warm new world was opening all around him. Max found he could raise his head, and there was sunlight. His senses filled with summer, a dry grass and chalk smell, the glare of ultraviolet, bees humming, crickets whirring, and a rumbling dust cloud coming closer and closer. Bison, 20 or 30 at least, with lighter coloured young ones galloping beside. In a moment they were pounding past, so close that in a few steps he could have reached out and touched them. They were dark shapes and brown flanks, curved horns and snorting muzzles, racing down a sunlit valley. Behind them, nothing more than faded golden shadows in the dust cloud, a glimpse of 2 pursuers, leaping cat shapes. They were gone. Max bent and touched the ground, and it was gritty and real. The grasses were waist high, thin and yellow where he stood, greener under the shadow of the white chalk cliffs. Overhead, as the dust cleared, was pale, achingly blue sky, while 6 hawks rose in lazy spirals on the thermals. There was no wind. The crickets, or whatever they were, grew electric shrill. Gradually he realised that he was standing on a track of beaten earth, and he turned to see it rising upwards towards the cliffs. The heat was dizzying. Très cool, said Esme, very clearly. So. The summer colours faded, sunlight withdrew, and the sounds diminished. He was back in his own world again. So, repeated Esme, reaching for her book. What a morning! He stared at her, speechless. You saw? Max nodded, and knew then without her saying that whatever he had seen, Esme had seen too, perhaps many times. How else had she drawn those pictures? He shook his buzzing head, but his thoughts would not untangle themselves. You okay, Max? Oh, yes, said Max huskily. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Louis should come down and eat breakfast. What? Food for Louis. Max nodded. She wasn't making sense, but he thought he'd better agree. Please, Max, go and fetch Louis, because Theo said, see Louis eat, said Esme patiently. And this penetrated, and Max knew where he was and jumped to his feet and then paused. Esme was already at work on a new page, her smooth dark head bent, her slim brown hands busy with charcoal and crayon. But she looked up when he asked, Esme, how long ago? Louis? 10 minutes, more since he went up with Abby. Not Louis, the pictures you draw. How long ago? When were they drawn the first time? Ah, said Esme, I think maybe you say 30,000 years? 30. Those animals running, those... What is that you're drawing now? Ours. Bear, said Esme. There were bears? Bears, yes, bison, horses, deer, cats, hyena, rhinoceros. Rhinoceros? Max rubbed his eyes, and his hands were dusty. His jeans, his shirt, his arms, all white with dust. And it was 30,000 years, finished Esme. Oui.